and welcome to week 3, episode 3 of See You at Mike's. I'm Trevor Binstock.
I'm Tyler Swalowski.
And I'm Prem Tucker. So we were kind of talking about this kind of before we came online, but I say Prem Tucker, which is Tucker. So Tucker is Thakker, which is already confusing enough for people because it's like, well, that's Thacker. What? But it's Tucker. Well, it's actually Tucker. If we were in India,
it's actually Thacker.
It's Thacker. But then my first name is not Prem. I've always known. I was thinking about this the past few weeks actually, because I was talking to my friends about my name, and we were talking about how it's pronounced Prem, and it was like, oh, like they felt kind of bad. They're like, oh, we didn't know. You just introduced yourself to us as Prem, like freshman year. It's like, yeah, I know, but because it was kind of like implicitly, explicitly, like I was just kind of self-taught that like I call myself Prem and not Prem because Prem is already weird enough in a place like North Dakota where there's like, I don't think I've ever met another Prem. And then Prem is like a little weirder because it's just it looks a little more unnatural than Prem. Mm-hmm. So I've been having a little bit of an identity crisis because it's like I've always known the whitewashed me and I've never known the fully like I'm Prem. Which at face value it's like, oh, it's just your name, like, and it's just like a pronunciation, but like it's kind of weird that I've always, just kind of introduced myself in a way that isn't how I was actually named by my parents.
Right.
That's pretty rebellious.
I mean, who I'm rebelling against, I'm not sure.
Your parents, obviously.
But I mean, I feel like this. I didn't. But yeah, like this was like a mutual kind of thing. I feel like I don't think me, like 4.5-year-old me, was like, I must like comfort my fellow white classmates and change the pronunciation. Like I feel like this is probably like a two-way street where it's like, yeah, like my parents probably were like carrying me as a tour, like, oh, this is Prem, like, because to make it easier for the parents, because like they had, an accent or whatever. So then I probably like learned it that way, that I am Prem. I mean, I don't know like the full process of learning your name as a child, but it's a little bit of a two-way street.
And ordering Taco Bell and saying your name is Prem is already like...
Yes. Oh my gosh. Because like even like any loud space or like, like going through a takeout, it's like Brem? Creme is the one that kills me because it's like, where is the k sound coming from? I'm saying Prem. And also if it's ambiguous and you're like on the fence, why would you think it's creme? Like, are there people named Creme? I mean, no offense if your name is Creme, but like, I feel like, I mean, maybe I'm biased because my name is Prem, but like, I feel like that seems more like something you'd guess and not Creme.
I was listening to a podcast with Dax Shepard.
Yep.
And he was like, someone introduced themselves to me as Blaze, like, sup, I'm Blaze. It's like, no, your name's not Blaze. That's not real. But we know like 6 Blazes, and also his name is fucking Dax.
When we were in Fargo, I was with Blaze, and he was closing up his tab at one of the bars, and he was like, what's your name? And he was like, Blaze. And he was looking up, he's like, oh, there you are. He's like, you got family around here? And he was like, no. And he's like, oh, okay, I know some other Blazes. He was like, Blaze is my first name. And the dude was like, Blaze is your first name? It's so sick. Like, yeah, he was just stricken by this name. But yeah, like I know a ton of Blazes.
It might be
I will say,
I mean,
yeah, like, there's the whole like what's in a name thing. Like, where did it all come from? And of course, like, every place has its own reason for why they name people, or like son of John, son of like Masons, like stonemasons, like, like all that stuff. But like, for Blaze specifically, I wonder like but I mean, like, was that also a sort of like utility thing? Like they like, maybe it came from like a last name or something, like not like Blaze son, but like, something where it's like, it was son of like a blazer of some sort, like, I don't know. Like I'm being...
Okay, yeah.
I'm off the cuff here, but like, like, did that name specifically come from something, or did someone just one day choose, you are my kid and your name is Blaze, and then it just caught up?
No clue, but my name Tyler, in the various readings
Is
of
that Taylor?
in the various readings of what my name means. The like serious one that's not from Urban Dictionary is like one who lays a path slash opens doors, coming from a tiler, someone who puts tiles down on the ground.
Hmm.
I
Did they
heard
say
that
like?
from Tyler.
Did they say like what year? Like
No,
what era that happened?
no,
98.
yeah,
That's when they first started building things.
yeah.
Yeah. That's when like roads happen and
Yeah.
doors.
It did
Yeah, no,
say
I've been
that my name Tiler was like an archaic spelling of my name.
Interesting.
yeah, I've been really interested in like the kind of where names get their meaning and stuff after my parents made my middle name Danger. Um
I
I
don't
think
know
they
your
just
middle
like
name. Is it legit Danger?
no, it's Brooks.
Oh hell, come on, Brooks, be more original.
I know, that's what I'm saying. My kid's middle name is gonna be Danger without a doubt.
What will their first name be?
Scoots.
If
Caution.
it if it's a girl, it'll be Battle Axe, and if it's a boy, I haven't settled on a boy name.
You can name it like Boy McBoyface.
What about Battle Axe? Battle Axe, it seems like the most gender
That's
neutral
a
name
that's
I've
a
ever
gender
heard.
neutral name, yeah.
So I don't know, like I feel like
It's
if you have
gender
a girl,
fluid
if you're a
even.
chick
Gender
named
I would
Battle
say it's
Axe,
gender fluid.
it's like, oh, it's a cool name. But if you're a dude and your name's Battle Axe, it's like, all right, cool guy. Like who are you trying to impress? You know?
That's true. That's true. Okay, so let's take this time to maybe think of like the most like gender neutral fluid like name that is like similar brand of battle axe, but like isn't like if it was like specifically like a cis guy, like all right, dude, like what's your deal here? Like
It's not gonna wear better on either gender.
yeah. Um
Hmm. I mean, is it also gonna be like an object or can it be like
no,
a
no, just
phenomena?
whatever comes to your mind. Something, um
Ferris.
Ferris?
Yeah.
Like Ferris Bueller?
Oh, I guess, yeah. Like Ferris Bueller.
Or like Ferris wheel.
I was, yeah, thinking Ferris wheel.
Yeah, because those are two different, So in that case, actually, how would you? Because those do like evoke different things.
Right.
Although you could say they actually have very similar
I,
energies too. In
dude, they're
fact,
both are wrong, you know?
How you feel about Vagabond? Vagabond could
I
swing for sure.
well, it could swing. Yeah, I mean, you
They're
could think of plenty of things that could swing. I
okay, but
guess,
think
but
about this. Vagabond's nickname is going to be Vag.
oh
Worth
yeah,
it.
that's well, yeah. I mean,
I feel like if you have a nickname with that though, it's all about just how you handle it as a kid. You know, like it can either be like a demeaning nickname or it can be like, hey,
yeah.
what's up, Vag? And you're like, hey, how's it going?
Yeah, and
Are you
then are
good?
you going to be the parent to
Well,
do that experiment to be like, is my kid going to be trilling
Yeah,
enough
it's
to
fully.
handle being called vagina?
Well, also there is the thing about like how names can like influence your life. So like the idea of like name privilege. So like people that have cool names oftentimes like end up doing cool things or like ending up in cool situations just by virtue of like for example, like if you're like in like a random selection thing and like someone's looking for a name that sticks out. Oh,
Mhm.
like this name is super cool. I'm just gonna pick them. Or like if you're like like applying to schools or like applying for a job and like everyone's largely pretty similar. It's
Mhm.
like, oh, this is a cool name.
I've
Yeah.
thought about that with
Um,
job interviews. Like if my resume comes across the desk, how Trevor Binstock
yeah,
looks. Like you would
right.
think that if you're just seeing names first, and they say
Mm-hmm.
like you have like 10 seconds on your resume, whether they keep it or toss it, like how a name would look there.
Yeah.
Um,
Or like if
for that,
the officer like knows like a Trevor and they're like, oh, like Trevor, like just like a toxic Trevor in their life, and they're like, all
right?
right, well, this
Yeah.
guy's out of here.
Or like their wife was cheating on someone named Trevor,
Yeah, I mean,
and they were
that's what I'm
like,
saying.
"Fuck all Trevors of all time."
Yeah, that'd be a
So,
huge issue.
I did garner like with meeting new people, introducing myself as SWAT. was like, I mean, that's a icebreaker immediately right there. Like,
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
Right,
called
that's
SWAT.
true.
And so,
Yeah.
especially
I
with
mean, it's
my
even
love for wooing people, it compounded into getting you places.
I would say it's even a secondary icebreaker because, like, I don't call you Tyler to other people. I say, "Oh yeah, my friend SWAT," and they're like, "What? SWAT?" They're like, "What do you mean?" I'm like, "Oh," and then I like explain, and it's like a whole like I'm ice breaking, and you don't even know it.
Yeah, you're welcome to the
That's
clout.
I use that as an example for just the nicknamiest nickname I'd like ever had in my life. I was like in high school, the teachers called him SWAT. It's just
Yes, it is. It is insane that like you like that. Like I have my own experience with my name, but you have a very experience with your name. Like because that's like from TV shows where there's like just that one character who like
Fonz.
is called something that they're just not. And it's like, oh yeah, like everyone knows him as that.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean,
So
I think it's been a couple of years since I've been primarily called SWAT, and so like when I was at Metagoshi, they mostly called me Tyler, and I honestly didn't notice anything. So I
yeah, it'd
mean,
probably be
well,
pretty normal because like we don't go home to your parents every day to them calling you Tyler.
yeah,
The way that you would.
right,
Like we'd see it sometime, and your mom would be like, "Hey, Tyler, how was school?" And I'd be like, "Tyler, oh, that's
yeah,
right." But for you, it was constantly switching.
yeah. And sometimes my mom would call me SWAT. Like if I was in a group, like at like basketball stuff, my mom would call me SWAT
yeah.
because it would be easier to get my attention
Oh yeah.
in space.
How about people where they go by their middle name? Like
Yeah,
we
I
know
knew
one
a
from high
Richard.
school. My flight instructor goes by his middle name, or my old one anyway. Like that's a strange thing too, because then like you're like, that's just what I want to be called. It's not a nickname that sticks. It's like I'm going to be called this, but then on everything you write your first name. You
Hmm.
always
I
see your
feel like
first name, but here your middle name.
I feel like that usually is less of like, oh, I just think my middle name is cooler. Like I feel like that like might be a justification people have. And of course I'm not speaking for people that do this because I don't do this. But
Right.
I feel like from the people I've met that do this or like know people that behave
Dude.
like do this is that I feel like there's like more so like less of like a embracement of a different name, but rather a rejection of the first name for a certain reason. Like whether it's like, oh, like it was my grandma's name or like they feel like it's just like kind of like either like there's a actual story there or it's just like sort of minimizes them in some way, whereas like the middle name either maybe does confer some sort of benefit because it's just a cooler name, or it's just like it's just not the first name.
Right.
Like I feel like it's less of like a like when you turn 13, you're like, oh, you know what? I like my middle name better. Cause like also like by that point, you're kind of trained to like, yeah, that's my name. Like I accept it as my name, like
My name is
um
Prem.
yeah, yeah, precisely. Like I
Like
feel
that.
like there's definitely a times. But what do I know?
So this is week 3.
This
Yeah.
is week 3.
Mhm.
Throughout, sort of like it was like an informal rule, but pretty much expected. It was just what we did. I don't know if it was like probably my dad's idea as a kid, but the thing was, if I joined anything, any different like group or like started, a new like habit, like anything, you're starting something new. You gave it 3 weeks to decide if you wanted to stick with it or not. 3 weeks was just the key amount of time because chances are like that was enough time to like get calloused, to meet the people in it, like get used to it, but it also wasn't too much of a time commitment if you just genuinely it wasn't for you.
Yeah.
And so I just thought about that. I think about that all the time. Like 3 weeks, that's the number. So after this podcast, either it's good to go and we're in for the long haul, or it's cut forever. This is the pivotal moment.
Yeah.
But then the thinking was if you stuck with it after 3 weeks, then you were in it until it was over, or until like the next reasonable time, so you weren't quitting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the other thing
Yeah.
too. So like, all right, you want us
Okay.
to keep doing it, then you're doing it until the end of the season or
It's like an
the end of the
opt out
project.
contract.
Yeah. So
Like
that's
you have
what
a
I was thinking
clause.
with this one.
All right. Okay. So this is big.
This is big. I didn't
Um,
know. I was already all in.
yeah, I mean,
Oh yeah.
yeah, so we're good to go.
Yeah, this isn't like joining the swimming team, there's a little bit
Yeah.
less going on. It's a little less demanding.
Yeah.
But I just thought that was worth mentioning.
Oh, for
Well, I'm
sure.
glad you did.
I do
I
think this like third week going into it, I felt very excited like a couple hours ago of like I don't know, getting
now how do you
juiced.
feel?
Oh, sitting here doing it, I
Mm-hmm.
feel even more juiced. I mean, like just having an opportunity to sit down with you guys and chat is beautiful, and then also to like perform and share it. That's, I mean, some of my favorite things of all time.
Yeah, I mean, this is great because I mean, we've been all over the place for the past 4 years, but if nothing else, it gives us to excuse to have, constant sort of rhythm of talking. So it's great.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I was thinking about earlier is, and this was just a very superficial thought, but I was thinking about like, as you get more comfortable with people, whether it's roommates or friends that you hang out with, or family, which is like the baseline, I think, for a lot of people in this um, idea is like, as you get more comfortable with people, like naturally you start to get more comfortable behaving differently.
Mm-hmm.
Like not just like more loose, like, oh, like I'm more comfortable like burping around my friends, but like you get like if you snap at someone, you feel less like of a recoil, like, or if you kind of like get mad at someone or like make a snide comment, um, you just like, oh yeah, like, yeah, I mean, you don't think about it consciously, but like, like if you're talking to someone that you like, no, even like not even like superficially that you want to get to know more, but like a decent friend, like you have a level of sort of like uh expressed conscience where it's like, if you snap, you would like, of course, like immediately, like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Like I was just, I had a long day or something. But like,
Right.
if you're around people, that like pretty well, like that's just not there. And of course, that's not like a revolutionary thing or an observation, but it was just like something prompted me to think about that. And it made me interested. And I don't necessarily think that that's a bad thing, but I find it interesting that like the first explanation that would come to mind is like, oh yeah, you're just more comfortable around someone.
Right.
um, and you're more comfortable expressing like an emotion that you feel. Um, and I think that's good. Like, of course, you shouldn't suppress your emotions. I think in general, but especially around people you're comfortable with. But like, I wonder if that's just like a quick justification of just like allowing sort of like tendencies within yourself that like you don't necessarily like want to have to just come out under the guise of comfort,
Mm-hmm.
like under the guise of like intimacy.
Yeah.
Um, I don't think that's fully the case, but I think maybe there's something there where it's like we readily just say, "Oh no, yeah, it's just because you're comfortable with someone that you're like more easy to like snap at them." But it's like, I mean, do you really want to snap at people generally? Like, of course, like everyone gets angry and mad about things, but like, I think in general, you want to be able to sort of not snap at people if you can,
Right.
or because that doesn't just affect the people around you, but it also like affects yourself. Like snapping at things in general isn't always great. I
Right.
mean, sometimes it's good to let emotions out, but getting angry doesn't have to be your outlet for emotions that make you angry,
Yeah.
And you know what I mean by that? Like you don't have to be angry to let out angry energy.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
I think
So that was just something I was thinking about.
my like conquest, if I had one through middle school and high school, was to be as vulnerable and intimate with as many people as I possibly could, and to like
Hmm.
really like open myself up and like open other people up.
Hmm.
And one of the ways that I did that, I mean, I don't know, Prem, you were probably a little late to it, but like Trevor, I mean, in middle school was like talking about like what's like the most like weirdest, newest, most shameful stuff. So like in middle school, a lot was like masturbation and like embarrassing stories and like pushing like boundaries, like finding where someone had like an experience that they've never like opened up about, and then I would like push myself in that direction to give them space to open up about it. And I, thought like, oh, I can like open up people by like being super crazy and weird. But basically, through my like conquest of trying to be like intimate and vulnerable with as many people as possible, I found that actually my like anger and like snarkiness came from people that the people who received that from me were people that I felt weren't receiving of my invitations to be vulnerable with me. And also that I didn't feel really intimately connected with. And it was insecurity that was pushing me to be more sarcastic. It was insecurity that was pushing me to like get angrier. It was insecurity to like, that was the fuel behind all these sort of like quirky ways of interacting with people.
Do you feel like that was either a response to them not reciprocating what you thought was like a connection, that you're like, oh, like, why aren't you doing this thing with me?
Yeah.
Or do you think like it okay, so it didn't serve as like a sort of like, okay, if they're not responding to this, I'll just behave the exact opposite of it, which is just like kind of like
No, it was
snark
like
and superficial.
I did my like things to try to like open people up by like, like talking about like depression, talking about masturbation, talking about like penises or vaginas or
Things that
something.
things that like middle schoolers especially wouldn't necessarily always want to,
Right.
or like be exceedingly comfortable just talking to
Yeah.
an almost bearded middle schooler about.
Yeah. And so like if they didn't really respond to that, and I ran out of ways, I ran out of my strategies of becoming intimate and vulnerable with someone, and I felt
You get
closed
pissed.
off. Yeah, I wouldn't know how to open myself up to that person
Yeah.
anymore, because I'd be like, okay,
Yeah.
I want you to feel comfortable, but I'm doing a horrible job.
Feel comfortable,
Yeah.
damn it.
It like it really thankfully rarely happened. And
Yeah.
like in retrospect, it was all on my side of like
Yeah.
pushing myself in weird ways.
Yeah.
And it wasn't necessarily people not wanting to open up, which I thought it was. And I thought that I was an intimidating person and they were afraid of opening up to me. But really, I was afraid that I wasn't welcoming and opening enough. And that was expressed with sarcasm.
Interesting.
Also,
Do you want to talk about?
Oh, sorry. You go.
No, this is going to start something totally different. So if you want to finish up,
No, I'm ready for something totally different.
cool. Do you want to talk about catharsis?
Yeah.
Only if we get some out of it.
All right. Well, yeah. Let me start with saying, so I think about, or let's talk about like stoic values would basically be that you keep catharsis to a minimum. Normally you would see catharsis as being sort of not masculine, like, it's more common probably, like it's in like high school, for girls to like cry after, like if they're really stressed from like studying, and that was just something you wouldn't touch as a dude. But then I feel like you come into the problem with, like anger issues being common in guys, like you need some way to get that out. So I guess a couple of questions I want to put on the table. First of all, how do you guys find catharsis? Just like outbursts of like emotion or energy, positive or negative, just some way to just like open out the valves. And can you limit catharsis in all ways, or like bring it down? Or, just like kind of let it rise? Is it something that it takes control to cathart? I'm gonna use cathart to cathart less, and if you have poor control, would you do it more often? Let's start with what kind of ways do you guys find yourself using catharsis?
Shoot.
I I feel like this is great because there's a lot we can talk about here,
Yeah.
and I'm glad you bring up like how we like behaved in high school with gender and stuff. I feel like I don't know if I have a proper like established relationship with negative catharsis at least. Um, I think some of that is perhaps just like the sort of masculine tendency to like bottle things in, but some of it is just perhaps I I think ideally I try to somehow translate the gas in the tank of the negative catharsis tank into like different fuel to come to a positive catharsis in some way. Whether that works or not, I'm not sure. Maybe that process itself is exceedingly draining by itself, and maybe like all the energy it takes to try to do that, like is like little spurts of negative catharsis, like constantly.
Hmm.
Um, so I think maybe that sort of coping or trying to like adapt is like just constant ebbs of that. I think the positive catharsis, at least for me, is definitely just like being able to be around people. Um, I feel like I don't know. I mean, I just think of like when you're feeling at your highest, and I think like a whole other part of this is like the tendency for people generally to be afraid of feeling too happy about things for a variety of reasons. One of it's just like, oh, I don't want to jinx myself, but it's like that's a whole other thing too, because it's like if you're afraid of jinxing yourself of being too happy, you'll never get to feel too happy because you'll always be like, I can't be too happy, and then it's like, well, you're never gonna get to be happy.
Yeah.
Um, but so I feel like at least for me, and I think especially this might be the case for a lot of people where they're like, with the pandemic and just every onslaught of just sad and tragic things that keep happening, of just like I feel like a lot of times right now generally in society you get a lot of high highs and low lows, and sometimes those correlate together and sometimes they don't. I feel like especially now that's the case where like there's a moment that either brings you back to like the before times or like to a time
Before
that is sort of
times.
like escaped from all the bad things happening around you, where you just feel like it's your own place, and that's like a high for you. And then maybe when you escape out of that bubble, it's a low or like a constant medium that feels low relative to that high. um I mean that's just in this instance, but I think in general, I think there's a problem where we have high highs that either are too short because of various social or societal reasons, or we make them too short out of fear that we're going to lose it anyways, and then
Hmm.
you end up losing that high. um and perhaps we have moderate lows or sort of like modulated levels of these because we modulate our expectations, as in like we just expect a lot of things are going to suck. So like it's not like you make the best out of the worst, but you just kind of like say, well, this is life. Like the meme of the dog in the
Yeah.
middle of the fire
I'm
saying
fine.
like this is fine. Yeah. um so I think, of course, this is all convoluted answers, but I'm like spitting out everything that's coming to my mind because there's so much here.
Yeah.
Right.
um but at least to your first question, I would just repeat that, yeah, I feel like in terms of my relationship with negative catharsis, I feel like it's perhaps sort of that attempts to, maybe not explicitly, but like materially, what happens is I distribute that negative catharsis into like energy spurts in trying to convert that into something positive.
Hmm.
And then positive catharsis, I think I strive for it. Like I like to have positive catharsis. And I think me, as anyone else, gets afraid that like when you start to feel it, it's like, oh, like this is temporary. Like
Hmm.
something's happening next. That's like it won't be like this all the time. Which, whether or not that's true or not, I think perpetuating that feeling is definitely not a good thing. To be like self-conscious when you should just feel happy about something.
Right. Yeah, that's huge. Huge. Um,
Yeah, I mean, positive catharsis, Prem. I just want to think of one that I remember. This would happen like at school if we were like hanging out like at your house or something. You would just like if we were just hanging out with like the boys, you would just like either like hug someone or grab them and just kind of like gently shake them and like like it just felt
yeah.
like you were just like bursting with just like positive energy, and like that seems like an example of like a positive catharsis that I've seen from you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think that's one reason why this year has been so awful. Like, I mean, way people have had it way worse than I have, obviously, but like just in terms of like, I mean, anyone that's like a really touchy feely person, and you're not a like, I mean, even before this, I feel like I sometimes was a little too comfortable just like grabbing someone and giving them a big hug. Whereas like, maybe sometimes people didn't necessarily always want me to just like grab them and give them a big bear hug. But like right now, I mean, even giving someone a handshake, it's like, are you doing handshakes?
Yeah.
Like it's okay if you're not.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
Sketchy.
that's been hard.
like
I mean,
I've had a couple of stage checks for my flight training since COVID
mhm,
has been going on, and it's something like
mhm.
all the applicants are always really anxious about it. It's like a really formal setting. Whether you pass or fail, like you learn a lot from your examiner. It's like every time I know I'm gonna like afterwards I'm gonna be leaving their office, and it's like I would kill for a handshake with this individual right now, but I know I'm just
Yeah,
gonna like all right, see ya, thanks. You take
yeah,
care. Like it just feels
yeah,
so right, like that it needs to happen.
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I
Um,
mean, the the amount that I wish to just dap someone up walking across the street, like, what's up, man? And I just like, nope, no dapping, no dapping, just.
yeah, there's a lot to this, and we'll keep on it. I want to finish off this first question
Please,
though.
please, 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 please,
Take it
please.
away. What do you got, Swat?
Okay. Catharsis. When I think of catharsis, I generally think so. I believe it came from this idea in psychology that like negative feelings need a place to go. That like when you have a negative feeling, they kind of like accumulate and like get a build up pressure, and there needs to be a little escape, a little on your Coke can of anger. And so when I think of catharsis, what I think of is like um, one of those like breaking rooms where there's like a bunch of glass, there's pottery, mirrors, all sorts of stuff, and the
Whoa.
person gets like glasses on and a sledgehammer. Also, one thing before I continue, you can really tell we're post millennials by how much we use the word like sincerely. We say it a lot. That's our is like. I notice
Mm,
Yeah,
listening to these. Um, but smashing all the stuff, and uh, that's your outlet is like large outbursts of like breaking things or shouting or ranting. People working at camp, uh, you have a young adult who is under an immense amount of pressure and stress trying to take care of 7, 8 year olds who all are hungry, tired, want to do something, bored, having the best time of their life, all at the same moment. And the way that, you know, we structure ourselves to deal with it is like, I need to vent to you for like 20 seconds and just go like, "Bah!" And
right.
basically from the research that I've seen and also my personal experience with this, Prem got to see this a lot with me in high school, how much I would rant. Um, Trevor and obviously the rest of everyone got to see it, but poor Prem, I trapped him in his
not as
car.
much as that, Prem.
Yeah. Um, that these outbursts of uh, emotion reinforce that emotion and don't actually dissipate it.
Mm, mhm,
The classical study is the breaking room one where they interviewed with a
mhm,
person that was like horrible. They shouldn't like that person at all. And then that person left, and the control group just sat there, and the test group broke all the stuff. And the people who broke all the stuff, after they did that, they were like, "How do you feel about this person? I want to fuck them up. Like if they came back, I'll punch their cock up through their throat." And the people who just sat there for 10 minutes were like, whatever. Like it's not as big of a deal. And so this like the negative side of catharsis, of like outbursts of negative emotion, really what I see it as is like not actually engaging with the emotions at hand, and kind of giving up on them, giving up on your negative emotions, and just like letting them rule you, and thinking that that'll get you through your negative emotions. And so the ways that I've really dealt with that side of me, because I am still a very explosive person if you get me in the right, if you poke me right in the right spot. And at this point, it's kind of just like my family is the only one that can really do it. But it has been through like meditation practices of engaging with my negative emotions and witnessing them and really tackling them head on, instead of letting them run me or trying to push them away. In terms of positive catharsis, I think like the moments of like sheer rapture and bliss that come, that is kind of where we go, where we've been talking about positive catharsis here, have come for me in these sort of mystical moments of like oneness and beauty. At camp, I mean, it happens at the end of the summer. You're sitting there with your 50 people that you've been through the thick of it with, and you're kind of like, hey, we've been together, no one died, and now you have an opportunity to just like be with each other and love each other as fully as you possibly can without having any expectations on you. And it's in those moments of like stripping away expectations, really, I think that's where it goes, is like once when you get fully naked, that's when the beauty can just finally come out of you. There's nothing in the way of like goodness. Like Prem, what you were talking about is like people have positive feelings, and their first impression of it is to get in the way of it, to stop it from happening, because they don't want to feel crushed. And so instead of feeling happy, they push it away and then armor themselves from being happy. And so the moments of positive catharsis in this sense have come from getting as naked as I possibly can. And when that happens, beauty and rapture just come out of me naturally. You don't even have to do anything. You just got out of the fucking way. I believe I've talked about that in the Tao Te Ching stuff that you guys have read, that I might release to the public. But yeah, just getting out of the way allows positive catharsis to just like happen. Bang, bang.
I'm glad you brought up the breaking room, because that's kind of what I was getting at earlier about like you don't have to express angry like emotions to get angry energy out, and I think like sometimes like we get caught thinking like you gotta like comfortably express your emotions and like not suppress things. So it's like, yes, of course, but like that doesn't mean you have to express them in a certain way, like in a toxic way that both doesn't help you and just also like might hurt someone else.
Right.
Because at first when you brought up the breaking room, I was like, wait, where's he going with this? Like, what about like a soft room where you like bounce a ball or like have a teddy bear or something? Trevor, what were you gonna say?
I was just going to. There was a lot here, by the way. I was just going to answer my own question.
Yeah,
please
start here. So right away, I mean, obviously, I thought of a lot of different things from both of you, but SWAT definitely took it in the direction that I was aiming. I guess, just maybe like different things that came to mind with catharsis. But Prem, I thought of a lot of things from what you said too. Um, so I guess for me, aside from like maybe like once a year in my adult life, and luckily I haven't had any like this hasn't been out of like grief or mourning, thankfully, but I'll have like a good cry just from like total frustration. And every once in a while, like I can sort of tell when it's happening. I was like, all right, this obviously has to happen. I don't fight it. But like other things, this one is a negative. It's usually positive. If I just have like am running like high energy or something, I'll get in my car and just like stretch into the back seat and just yell like really loud, not like an angry yell, but almost like a super loud yawn. There's that one. And I mean, just on like catharsis, because I feel like there are people, where like their outbursts are like, like a little more aggressive than other people's, and some people they just don't seem to have catharsis very often. But one thing that I think is sort of an outlet for my energy, and it's not a good thing, it's a bad habit I've been trying to crack for a while, is I'll just chew on the skin around my fingernails. And it's like directly related to energy, just how much I have in me, because it can be anxiety.
Right.
Like I talked about stage checks, like I had stage check anxiety and noticed that I would like get more rough with my fingers. But also like the Green Day concert, I got back to where I was standing with Zach, and like, amazing moment. I'm super excited. It's really cool. And I like had my fingers were bleeding just from like biting on them. Like that's just what I do to like bleed off that energy.
For context, Trevor got called up on stage during a Green Day concert.
Yeah.
I think you need to give the full explanation, and we can probably like put the video somewhere.
No,
Can you?
I can tell the story sometimes. It could be a story. It's fine.
Yeah. All right. Fair.
So I'd say those are like. So I don't think I have catharsis quite as often as maybe I would if I didn't have that like small little thing, like SWAT said, just kind of like cracking the can open. I think that maybe that takes the place of catharsis a little bit. I still like yell in my truck, or sometimes like if I get the idea of like some project to do something, I think that happens when I'm running like high energy, because once I get the idea and I'm like thinking about it and all the different ways it could go, I need to go and start it.
Yeah.
Like my like hands will shake with like I need to just make the first step, just like get it started, and then I can back off a little bit. But I think that might be a form of catharsis for me too. Go for it.
Well, no. If you have thoughts, keep going. This is a follow-up question, so go.
Mine was gonna be following up on your guys' comments. So
Proceed to the highlighted route.
okay.
You don't want to ask
So-
a follow-up question, Prem?
Yeah, your
It might.
follow-up-
All right. Well, it's a general follow-up. Then, if you think it absorbs into yours, we'll just keep going. I was just gonna ask if you guys think that these relationships have, and SWAT, you kind of alluded to what it was like before, so maybe this is kind of already answered. But like, do you feel like these relationships have evolved since like middle and high school? And do you think like, did you find yourself like reflecting on like whether those relationships with positive and negative emotions and expressions were influenced by like people around you, or the environment around you?
Yeah. I think in my case, I've changed a whole ton in terms of like just like sheer base mentality since like middle and high school. And cuz like I think I told my mom in middle school, I was like, I fucking hate everybody so much. Like I don't like going to school, I don't like the kids, I don't like the teachers. And my mom was like, that doesn't really seem like it's true. And I was like, I know, because I love everyone so much. I like want them to be happy and like be my friends, but like I still find it like mind numbing to sit in school. And I mean that kind of sort of dichotomy of like I cherish the humanity and the like vulnerability and people's struggles, and I cherish people's pain and
Mm.
their like fears. But like this superficial sort of like high school grades, the meritocracy, the hierarchy, I was like, I hate everyone at the same time. And so I was very much a charged, angry, uh, like I think I talked about this one time where I was like, I listened to punk rock music, but I didn't really relate because I really loved the people that I wanted to tell to fuck off. Um, and I think really for me it was through like my environment, because I wasn't trustful of like adults, institutions, or other people around me. I really like took my own kind of way of going about things, and that has been through like contemplative practices. And those sorts of things really shape me into like engaging with my thoughts about people that get me so angry. Like, what is it? Where's the problem? Where's my issue with people? And finding that like those issues are based in uh, self-preservation and fear, and it's a lot easier to love these people and just love them instead of love them and hate them at the same time. And when I can get over the fact of people not being exactly how I want them to be all the time, then the love that was already there has a lot more space to like come through. And I find myself being a lot less angry and frustrated.
I think I might have found a really grand interconnectedness with a lot of the things we've been saying just now. I'm going to pick through it.
Yeah.
I'm going to start on SWAT's side. Right away, what you started saying just reminded me of a quote that I think is really important for everyone to understand. You know, you've all heard it before. That goes, pain that does not get transformed gets transmitted.
Mm. Yeah.
Just talking about, I think that's really important to like figure your own shit out and don't bottle it up and then end up snapping at somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
And then, yeah, I think sort of on that too. Like, I feel like a lot of the people that I know that have like issues with anger, when they're not having outbursts, they're sort of reserved, quiet, don't talk that much. I think, and maybe this could be an upbringing, like a poorly masculine way of looking at it, saying like you don't express your feelings. It's not for men to do. But I think it's sitting with your emotions is going to help you like not finding that one outlet that you need to have at some point. I think like it's really crucial to have a silly goose time. It's just like it needs to happen. So that was just some thoughts on SWATs. But then Prem, going back to what you were saying, sort of like with the wave, the highs and lows that you might feel, and you almost want to like taper off the highs. I've thought about that a lot. Like, let's think, I'd say it would swing in sort of like 2-week intervals for me. It seems about normal. Like I'll have a good, like a real good, like 3-4 days, and then come down about a couple weeks later, maybe 3-4 days that are a little rough. And so most of the time is coming up or, starting on the way down, but then those peaks are really noticeable. And so you think like, so I've started to recognize when I'm feeling really good, I'm like, I know how this goes. Inevitably, I'm like soon to be headed for a crash, not like right away. Oh, this is good. And so you start to like try to taper your expectations when you're high. You want to be like, all right, maybe let's back off a little bit. Let's not lean into this like great feeling that I'm having, to try to mellow out the lows. And then when you're feeling low, obviously you do things that are going to try to cheer you up. That's totally normal. But then trying to lean away from your highs, that's not normal. That probably shouldn't be happening. So let's think about, we're looking at, someone that maybe has like manic depression, and we're thinking about this sine wave that's right there that is centered on y=0, right? And
Mhm.
they've got really like deep valleys and high mountains, and they're all over.
Mhm.
And then, someone who's maybe like very stoic, let's say, their goal is to try to just tighten everything up.
Yep.
They're ideally going for a flat line.
Sure.
Um, it's very similar to the pendulum, right?
Mhm.
We're thinking about it swinging back and forth,
Yeah.
and you can either think about letting it go as far as it wants, or trying to like bring it tight and let that swing happen a little bit less. But I'd say, that's another like pretty futile task, because you don't want to limit the lows, or you don't want to limit your highs for fear of the lows. What we're trying to do is find a way to make it so it's not based on y=0, it's based on y=1, y=2. So sort of what I started thinking with this is, and something I thought for a while, catharsis really is an indulgence.
Mhm.
It's like eating chocolate. Like, it's something that you indulge yourself in, whether it's good or bad. It's like you're sort of letting it happen. It's like a lapse in discipline when you're having catharsis. And so you could say like that's bad. I don't want that indulgence. But then all that's doing is just tightening that wave. Um, Whereas, saying I want to be more stoic, or no. So then the other side would be, well, screw that noise. I want to experience everything out of life, right? I don't care how low the lows get. I just want to like feel everything. I want to feel the fiercest anger. I want to feel the like most ecstasy that I possibly can. Like, I want it all.
Mhm.
You're still basing it on zero. You're just letting it go out of control. So I think that where I've been at before these sort of discussions is that, yeah, catharsis is an indulgence. It's a lapse of discipline, and it should pretty much be avoided.
Mhm.
But I think it's important that we try to get off of just that, well, in this case, one axis way of thinking, and we're like, all right, well, how can we just shift the whole thing? How can we exit that one way that we're allowed to try to move this scale?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot of actually really good contemplative writing on this, and I think one of them that comes to mind, probably for a lot of people, is Saint John of the Cross, the Dark Night of the Soul, which is talking about. I believe I haven't read it personally, but I've been taught it by a couple different contemplatives that when you're going through like meditative and spiritual practices, you start to see that your highs become less high and your lows become less low. And you start to move adjacent to that axis into the unfamiliar territory of not being on that pendulum anymore through meditative practices and contemplative practices. And what happens is you start to feel like you're losing the yum yum of life, because you're not going to have your highs anymore, you're not going to have your lows anymore, and it's going to just be kind of bland. And that culminates into the dark night of the soul. uh, but I kind of think about a lot of this in terms of like an emotional train where um, emotions are not disparate from each other, such as like if you have anger could be the front engine that's pulling the train, and then behind anger is like shame, is the next car that anger is pulling, and behind that shame is guilt, and behind that guilt is frustration at yourself, and then behind that can be more anger, and behind that can be something else, and so much else. And through um I think you were talking about your cycles, Trev, of highs and lows.
Mhm.
Back, I think when I was the least in touch with myself and the least healthy, I was having like 4 month cycles of like really high excitement down to like really like watch Bob Ross and cry in bed. And um now like my neutral state feels amazing. I feel good almost all the time. And then I feel really good maybe for a couple hours. And I feel really bad for maybe a couple hours. Maybe not even really bad. I don't even know the last time I felt really bad. Um, and what has happened through like contemplative practices is that these trains of emotions that come through, instead of like anger coming and like taking me for a week, and then shame behind the anger taking me for 2 weeks, and then guilt behind that anger taking me for 4 weeks, and then frustration coming in to end off the train for another month, and then going to like positive emotions of like bliss and elation into like joy and charity, happiness, whatever sort of things you could put on a positive train that comes through. Now it's like I might get angry for like 10 minutes, and then after the anger I'll feel a little ashamed for like half an hour, and then I'll feel a little guilty for like another half an hour, and then it'll be gone. It'll have moved on. It'll have passed through me and done what it needs to do in that shorter amount of time than these longer swaths of crazy time period. Those are like 4 notes that I wrote down, and I try to put them together. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
It is interesting that as you're sort of describing this, like, and as we're thinking about like the sine waves and like either the sort of up and down waves or just like the flat line, it is interesting that even like, we think of those as like the two kind of like basic equations and like how to like escape that. It's funny that like sort of like a spiritual commitment to developing or trying to escape the two options, or to modulate between them healthfully. It's interesting that even with that development, it's still like the final product is some sort of like perversion of the two, as in either like
Mm-hmm.
you uh, dedicate yourself to, as you mentioned in the former case, like it almost ends in a sort of like blandness,
Yeah.
in that like
The dark night of
you
the soul.
yes, you balance both waves to a sort of steady state, or you get to this different development where it's like you're accepting of welcoming all the feelings, but they're not distinct in any way per se. Like they're sort
Mm-hmm.
of an amalgamation of everything, such that life is also an amalgamation of everything.
Yeah. Sorry
So
to interrupt you,
go go
but
go go.
quick thought popped into my head, and um, this like emotional scale of good and bad feelings, positive and negative feelings. Uh, the dark night of the soul is like the end of that on the spiritual path, but the beginning of something totally new on like a different plane of like reality of how you perceive what good feelings feel like and what bad feelings feel like. And one of my favorite teachers talks about it, saying that like being in this world where everything is like either good or bad and put through that matrix is like only having one channel on cable. Like you don't see the full picture of how everything can be. And
Hmm.
you get to the point where someone can be like, hey, is like Tyler, everything is hopeless, right? And it's like, yeah, everything's hopeless. And you're like, hey Tyler, this is so good. There's so much hope in this world, right? And you're like, yeah, there's so much hope in this world. And they're like, oh man, Tyler, this is the absolute worst. Like I can't imagine anything worse than this. Yeah, there's not really anything that can be worse than this. And there's someone who's like, Tyler, this is the greatest thing of all time. And you're like, yes, this is the greatest thing of all time. And that comes through the post, that comes after the breaking down of all this. Hey, nice crotch.
Sorry. Looking for something.
Yeah, you just reminded me of that in your talking. Sorry
That
if I cut you off and derailed
no,
your
no.
train of thought.
That reminds me of a shoot, what's it called? Now I'm trying
A
to
GIF, a meme.
No, not a meme this time. I know most of my references are meme, but no, the freaking Slaughterhouse 5. When they're like,
Uh,
do you know what reference I'm talking about? When they're like, it's literally exactly as you described it. Like
the
when you,
aliens.
yeah, when you're like, is it like this? It's like, yes, like it's all of those things.
Yeah.
Um, I forgot the exact like passage text, but like it gave
It's
me
been
extremely similar energy to that passage.
it's been years since I've read Slaughterhouse Five, so
Wait,
all I
Prem,
remember.
you reading it and even just discussing it with me, I thought I had forgotten so much about that, but then I realized like it came back so much just talking about it with you, just because of how like I just like reconnected with the feelings I had when I read it the first time. I was like, oh yeah, that's what that felt like. See, it's been a
Yeah.
long time for me too, but I remembered quite a bit to hang with you in talking about it right after you were fresh with it.
Yeah, I need to remember that one passage. I remember when I was texting you about it, and you were like, "Oh yeah, that thing," and I was like, "This is so fun." We're like reconstructing your memory of the book.
I also could just
Wow,
read it again, but you know,
it's a good read. Not too long.
no, yeah, yeah, it's one that I like to recommend to people. It's like recommending a show to someone that has one season. I feel
Yeah.
so fine doing that, you know?
Yeah.
It's like
Yes.
it's one season. Like I'm not recommending that you watch that 70s show, you know? Like
Right.
Yeah.
so it's
Yeah.
same thing like Slaughterhouse 5. I love giving that book as a gift, recommending it to people because it's like, oh, you could tear through that thing, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
A lot better than Gravity's Rainbow, the 800-page dense ass novel that took me 7 tries to get through.
Yeah, I remember you working through that.
Yeah.
Good time. Bram, do you remember the train of thought that I derailed you from?
No. I think what I was saying was I was just laying out that came to mind that like even with this development that sometimes the sort of developed versions of them can still be largely resembling the things you're trying to escape from
Yeah.
of like either like an evolved stoicism. Well, I mean in the case that you were bringing it wasn't
Yeah.
necessarily that was the end, but or just like a in the latter option it was actually a much more like as you were describing like the not like two distinct trains but just like feeling everything.
Mm-hmm.
But in your case that in doing so, you actually get to feel good without necessarily feeling the insecurity or the armor that
Yeah.
prevents you from continuing to feel good.
Yeah.
Right.
Because sometimes it's just the armor that is cutting it short rather than something that like
Yeah.
the universe is like commanding you, like, oh, you've had your 3 days of happiness. Now buckle up, champ. Like,
We don't
Yeah.
often consider the cost that it is to armor ourselves from what hurts us the most, also armors us from what makes us feel connected.
yeah. I mean, in the same way that like when you think something bad is gonna happen and you like just kind of like accept that oh yeah like that's just gonna happen like I lost this thing so like what's the point, like not in the whole like oh it's self-fulfilling then you're gonna lose but just like even if you do end up like even if the bad thing does end up happening like your reaction is almost like worse because like it was like prolonged in a way and you still feel bad about the thing when it happens obviously.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's like when people are like, "Oh, like, I don't wanna be too optimistic about something because then, like, if it goes wrong, then it'll hurt more." And it's like, either way, like, the bad thing happening will suck. So it's like, I don't know, that like, I just feel like in many cases, like, it doesn't hurt to just be even hopelessly optimistic about things
Yeah.
because it's
Yeah.
like, if nothing else, yeah, like, the bad thing will happen, but in the interim, at least, like, you won't feel bad about the bad thing probably happening.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, sometimes the bad thing will happen more often or easier because you accepted that it's going to happen. I don't know.
Yeah. No, like Swat started saying like that his neutral feels great. that's the goal of what I'm talking about, where like stoicism isn't the answer and manic depression isn't desirable either. But if you can move the baseline up from 0, and so you can still experience the highs and the lows, you can keep getting the highs, but your lows don't crush so bad. And then your baseline, like where you spend most of the time in between those peaks feels good, feels better than 0. That's what we want to do. So yeah, Prem, you're saying like if you're someone, like, oh, if I get my hopes up about this, it's gonna hurt worse. Like, so you tame your expectations, you have low expectations, then the thing happens to you, and you're like, there it was. See, man, I knew it was coming. You're bringing your baseline lower than 0, and your neutral is even worse than just a plain neutral.
Yeah.
Yeah. So moving the amplitude isn't really the goal. It's the same thing as staying on the pendulum, going between what we were talking about last time.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's finding that way to move it up, which is getting off of that one way of thinking. Yeah, I wasn't even thinking about ways that you could bring it below 0, but yeah, that's a perfect example.
So glad that calculus is finally paying off for me. Mr. James, this one goes out to you.
It's not paying off for me that very well, as I'm probably using like subtly the wrong terms for.
Yeah, I was like, every time you said like the equation or like the x and the y axis, even the x and the y axis, I was like, oh, I hope that was the right axis he mentioned, because I can't even correct him because I don't know.
I'm looking at like one high and one low on my notes, and that's how I'm visualizing all this. I think I crushed amplitude though.
No, yeah, I mean that one was definitely, yeah,
yeah. The amplitude of how many times we said in the last 3 seconds was really high.
I think you're looking for frequency on that one.
Yeah, come on.
Waves have a frequency too.
Waves do have a frequency.
Then that would be how often you switch from high to low.
I'm thinking on the y-axis is the number of yeahs. And so the more times we say the higher the wave goes.
Okay, so it's a different kind of graph.
That would be like a bigger I think you're saying the number of times that you say it'd be like the number of yeahs packed into one given value of x.
That just depends on your scaling. Because those both could be true depending on what your other axis is. Because it's either like time. Well, it could be time either way, just like the amount of yeahs you say in a given amount of time, or like the amount of within that
3 seconds.
This is literally this is definitely frequency, man. Do we have like infrared yeahs, or do we have like UV yeahs?
It all depends, man.
What's your longest but like no boy, just
my longest ever. See, that would definitely be how high up the y it goes. It'd just be like the value of one versus the number of yeahs.
Well, then how are you graphing the number of yeahs? Is that just the?
Is that just the tight?
Yeah. The amount of times it crosses.
Yeah, for a given value.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So. Yeah. So it could also be the amount. So it graphs both. It graphs both because the cross is how many. The amplitude is how much yeahs within the
But okay, we have just created not a no, because a no is not graphed, but an anti-yeah.
Yes, because it's just negative. It's not which could be anything. Which could be because everything in life is either a or a not.
All right, that's true. But we are gonna have that negative which could be a no. We haven't really defined it yet.
Yeah. It's possible within the parameters, but it isn't necessarily.
If we move the baseline to the point where the bottom of that amplitude is above 0, then there would be no negative It'd just be like,
Yeah. If we like limited
some of the is higher than the other half of that but it's still all If it's in the hemisphere.
I'm breaking.
Yeah. If the domain and ranges were both above 0, that would be the case. Yeah. But if not, then we have a situation where, in that situation, then everything is a
Yeah.
It's just how much is in it. Like every entity has a value of yeah. If this graph is just like the scale of life, I guess.
Did we introduce a contradiction by saying that we bring up this sine wave above zero, going back to what Swat was talking about before we started streaming? If you are making it so that you're limiting the amount of time that you spend in the shithole of this graph, are you thereby belittling the experience of your peaks?
It depends on how it happens, right? Because with all these pendulum things, what you're gonna find is the answer to the pendulum question cannot be found upon the pendulum. It has to be on the z-axis adjacent to the pendulum. So when you're adjacent to the pendulum, you witness your negative feelings different than when you're on the pendulum. The totality of the pendulum is able to be experienced when you're adjacent to it. It is just like negative feelings. So like if I'm feeling lonely, my experience of being lonely is different than 2 years ago when I was living at Brookstock, living at the house, feeling lonely. Then it was like just sheer depression. I was lost. Now when I feel lonely, I am witnessing myself being lonely, and I can be there with myself being lonely. And the experience of that is not like a wholehearted attribution to negativity that totally encompassed my life as it did before, but instead can be seen as a feeling that points to a thought of an experience. You know, I'm lonely because I'm here alone at the center and I don't have any friends here with me. And I can engage with that and see if it's true, see how it makes me feel, see what's the extent of its reality. And like, do I need to have a person here with me to feel alone? All these sorts of things come from being orthogonal to the pendulum and witnessing your feeling instead of being like, oh fuck, I'm lonely, I got to deal with it somehow by like offsetting it with a positive emotion. So I'm going to go masturbate and watch The Simpsons, or I'm going to go into town and find some friends to hang out with. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think saying that your answers to like your stripes on the pendulum aren't going to be found on the pendulum. You have to take the step back. It's like if you're on a roller, I'm just trying to like see how I could think about this for riding that wave. Then if you're riding a roller coaster,
Yeah.
your reference to your sight reference to how high or low you're going is the ground.
Mm-hmm.
Right? If it was a roller coaster that was just a track, you'd be able to feel, how hard you plummet and how hard you pick up at the bottom, but you wouldn't be able to see or really have any other reference other than just how it feels.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think the same way if you were, on that wave, but you couldn't see
Mhm.
the lines that you were based on, you wouldn't know how high or low you're going. You would just be at the mercy of how it feels. But if you were to zoom out or have those lines for reference, you'd be like, okay, I can see it now. So yeah, it'd be the same thing that being on it, you are completely unable to perceive its depth.
Yeah.
Visually.
Great.
Look at it, see those
Yeah.
horizontal lines that give it value.
That's really good. I mean, you're relative to your perspective.
Right.
As people lazily say when there's nothing else to say, it's all relative. It's all about your perspective.
Look, from my end of the spectrum,
Yeah.
says Peter.
But
no, that was good.
Getting to like the relativity thing, like that is such a big deal.
Yeah.
People say it, but they don't take it to heart.
No, right. Yeah. No, I mean, that's why I said it like, oh yeah, people just say it. But like if you actually like think it, like to fully distance yourself in such a way, or even attempt to, it's a improbable thing that of course I don't know if we could ever fully do it. But even the attempts to do it is already so much.
Right. And so like contemplative practice is like using thought to view thought in that way
Right.
of
Yeah.
like, asking the question, you know, let's say I am lonely. If I have that
Yeah.
thought, it's like, who is it that's being lonely? Is it true? You're having this thought. How does that thought make you feel? Can you
Mm.
even know that it's absolutely true?
Mm.
What would it be like if that thought wasn't there at all?
Hmm.
And then, a really good one, if you've gone through all of that, is like, what's the opposite of it? Is that just as true? I'm not
Hmm.
lonely. Yeah, that's just as true.
Hmm.
Yeah.
As a side note, yep, there it is. You hear that spot?
The gulp.
Yep. You're, I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm doing that too because I'm sipping water and my mic's close, but it's you just have a very sharp microphone.
I also
Didn't
have a
get it that time.
pretty pronounced
You
swallow.
gulp. You gulp.
I
You're a
do.
gulper.
I know.
It's
Sorry to all the listeners that have been hearing my throat noises for this whole cast.
That was the first time we heard it.
Oh, was it? Okay, that's good.
I don't know
Maybe
about
it was
that
the
one.
first time you
That was the
I
noticed.
first
don't know
time I
about that one.
noticed.
No,
Probably
the
be a little
re
bit more sensitive to
the
it.
reason I said side note was I was waiting for you to gulp.
Oh, really?
That's why I said there it is.
That's hilarious.
Because all right, let's take a little. Let me try this.
Okay, I mean, you definitely like sent that one down though.
Yeah, I don't know. It was like a slight. It was more like a.
The
It's
stream
more
will
like when
hear
you
it different than you guys.
I think it was just you like
Oh,
pulling your mouth away from the bottle, like the rather than the globe.
well, it's all relative after all.
Okay, speaking of relativity,
Yeah.
you had brought up that you wanted to talk about celebrity and the
Yes.
idea of celebrity. And
Yeah.
relativity is a great segue into
Yeah. No.
celebrity.
Yes, that's actually a great point. I Celebrity is interesting for a range of reasons.
Mm-hmm.
I think one is, of course, celebrity means different things in different cultures. There's different uh, sort of honors and aesthetics prescribed to celebrity in different countries. Sure. But I think one thing that's interesting, at least in America, of celebrity is, of course, for one, I think celebrity totally dehumanizes people. I mean, face value, square one. We do not see celebrities as human beings.
Right.
But conversely, we of course also see them as superhumans, um, because that is the closest thing we have to superheroes is celebrities. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I think celebrity often brings out the worst in people because they are some of the most dehumanized humans that are prominently known. Other than, of course, like we all dehumanize people with our various biases and stuff like that. Of course, racism, classism, whatever. But I mean, in terms of just like in general, like a random person on the street, I think some of the most dehumanized people are either homeless people naturally, and then celebrities because they're artifacts that we look at and prod at
Right.
and are like our societal dolls. Um, I mean, we use like the tabloid is not as much of a reporting, like the tabloid isn't telling us things as much as it's just telling a story
Right.
of like fairy tales, like messed up fairy tales, but fairy tales nonetheless.
Mm-hmm.
That are meant to tell us things that we want to hear or like would be interested in hearing or like are juicy.
Yeah.
So those only make these people even more like toys for us. Um, but then on their side of things, of course, they exist in this weird space where, like, of course, they're the subjects of these things, but then they naturally also have feelings and emotions and beliefs about things.
Right.
Um, so not only are we not understanding their feelings as humans because we've dehumanized them, and also they have to modulate themselves because of that to either go with the bit or try to prevent themselves from being swallowed up in it,
Right.
which is a totally dehumanizing process in its own way, to like try to be a human while everyone thinks you're not human or operates as if you're not human. But also, when they do express human emotions, it's either radically denied or rejected or ignored, or there's a discomfort or disdain for it.
Right.
And I mean, a side thing is how we treat some celebrities and some politicians as monarchs in a country that supposedly has rejected monarchy,
Right.
but we absolutely love monarchy, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Like, in the same way, half the time the president, at least presidents that, don't really take that much executive action or don't choose to like organize the people in a certain way, are more so just heads of state than anything else half the time.
Mm-hmm.
And some of that, of course, is just because Congress is ineffective, whatever. But there's so much there. But I think we can focus on the first part, less about the presidency being like a proxy king and queen.
Yeah.
But yeah, celebrity just brings out the worst in us, man. It makes us view these people as just toys for our pleasure. It completely removes them from our sense of they are just also human beings alongside of us.
Right.
And it also, aside from making us bad people, it also ruins their humanity. They become what we believe them to be, because humans also obviously exist alongside each other. Like, your existence is defined by you, but it's also defined by others because you define yourself in relation to how you think others see you.
Yeah.
So naturally, that plays into how celebrities see themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So you're not only dehumanizing yourself insofar as you begin to see humans as something other than human, you also ruin their humanity because they're responding to your vision of them.
Yeah.
And it's just so deeply, deeply sad.
I think I might be a broken record on this sort of thing, and it'll probably come up every single time we talk about anything ever. But the way that value functions in our lives is the alienating force, one of the primary alienating force is. And especially in our market-based socioeconomy of your relationship to every waking moment is like, is this worth it? Like, am I producing enough value? Is this moment holding value for me? All these sorts of questions are the basis for value, and those things separate us from a sort of transcendent human connection. And in the case of celebrity, like you're pointing out, like that is the end of the line, where celebrity is the maximalization of value. They are they have the highest level of value imaginable in a human being. And what happens to their life? It is non-existent on a human connection level. From speculation from where we're sitting, but I mean, if you've ever seen that YouTube video of the guy shouting "Leave Britney alone" and the various like mental breakdowns that people have had, like the alienation that comes from value, even in the case of celebrities, valuing someone good in a positive fashion. There's the juxtaposition of how does that celebrity feel about themselves, how much society values them, and how do they reconcile those things when they don't match up. And that is the point where like the huge amount of alienation occurs, because in reality there aren't material conditions that we find where a certain value has hit its full limit. For example, how smart I am, I will never hit my limit of value in terms of what my brain can possibly do. Speaking of which, I totally just lost my train of thought. But Let me look at something. I was writing a little bit about this. Trev, do you have anything that comes to your mind right away?
Not really. I mean, even when we started on this, yeah, mostly like Prem seemed like he had a lot to go on, and no, I don't really have too much in my brain beforehand on this one, so
Right.
I'm listening.
Okay, so like when it comes to value, that when we value something, that creates a subject object relationship, right? Where a person, me as an ego, as a self, sees a celebrity and evaluates the celebrity, sees what value that celebrity has. And let's say I love Paul Rudd. I think he's sexy. I think he's funny. I think he's charismatic. I like watching him in movies. I like watching YouTube clips of him being funny. Whatever it is, his value is making me feel good with how good he looks, how funny he is, all these sorts of things. Just being the best human ever, Paul Rudd. That relationship is dehumanizing because I am witnessing not like relative parts of Paul Rudd and trying to extract whatever profit I can out of these not Paul Rudd parts that I see. These like marketable versions of Mr. Rudd that are running around on the internet. And I think one of the biggest issues is like just the relationship with the person itself looking out and creating a celebrity as much as it is for the celebrity, which I think is what you were talking about, Prem, is like when you are the person who is creating a celebrity, your actions are dehumanizing someone else. And you are doing the act of alienating someone else. I would like to. Oh, go, Trev.
With celebrities, and you're sort of picking the parts, constructing this perfect person based on like bites or roles or interviews or whatever. Do you think that everyone is sort of trying to attain the same construction in themselves when we look at social media, in the way that you only you only post like your highs, you know uh, the majority of people aren't like, hey, I woke up at like 11:30 this morning and didn't get
Didn't
out of bed
shower.
until 1. Yeah,
Yeah.
like you're always posting the highs. I think that's it's probably something that it wasn't impossible to go for before the internet and social media. When everyone wanted to look like Audrey Hepburn, you'd only see her in movies, but you could still not leave the house without makeup on, or
Yeah.
find your other ways to like reach that. But I feel like right now it's definitely more amplified. Like, think of all the people you're following on Instagram and think of the last time you're in a room with them and how your image of that person is so far removed from what they're like.
I was talking to Prem about this. I wrote this weird little email, I think, to Prem, a mini rant, like back in the days of high school, where I talked about. Oh, and we did Zoom and talk about this, but um, how like professionalism, basically like the sociological idea that we are like the most when we interact with the world around us, we try to be the most marketable version of ourselves. And so, like in the professional world, you are trying to be the most professional, the most proper, the most efficient. And on like various different levels, it happens. But when the internet came around, there was this whole new space where you got to curate what your marketable self online would be entirely. Your whole entire image online is only what you want to market, only what you see as valuable. And so when you create online, I mean, this podcast is an example of it. Like, we're finding something that is the most marketable version of what we possibly have, that we see value in, and putting that onto this machine that tries to distribute value to people who value certain things through algorithms and whatever. And then in the case of Instagram, it's like being really cool and having fun. I don't know. I haven't been on Instagram in 5 years, but I don't expect that the atmosphere is any different than what it is. But I think I really get to this idea that if we are trying to connect ourselves with people, and if the internet's goal is to get us to be more connected than we ever have before, then value has to be taken out of the equation. But in our society, in the liberal free market America, value is the driving force of all relationships, which is then the alienating force in all of life. And so, I mean, stripping value. This is where I wanted to go before you brought that up, Trev, and why I think I'll be a broken record in the future podcast with this, because this is, I think, my primary focus right now is like how to be a de-alienating force in this world. How do we reintegrate people with their own humanity and with creation as a whole, with each other? Yeah. The idea that did you have something to say, Trev?
I would say it's like Better World, but like add metaphysics.
Yeah. I had this idea. I went to a young adults retreat for the ELCA.
The young adults retreat?
Yeah, a young adults retreat.
That sounds like the libertarian events where it's like young leaders for liberty, or like,
yeah,
that's the vibe I get.
It was basically that for the ELCA. Oh my gosh. I never get called ever. And on this podcast, it's been 3 for 3 that I've gotten called. Stop.
It's 9:46 where you are.
It is.
Who's
So
retreat?
What was I saying?
Retreat. Adult retreat.
Okay, sorry. I thought you were telling me to backtrack by saying retreat.
Retreat into the brain palace.
Yeah,
yes, please. Always go back.
So I went to this young adults retreat. And one of the activities that we did was like come up with a new thing for the church, because, you know, we value young adults and we think that you guys have great ideas. Okay. That was literally, I think, verbatim what they said. They like did this like little 1 hour long presentation about like involvement in the church, and like the best way to get young adults involved in the church is by having young adults lead the stuff so that people will be interested in it. I mean, new, crazy, like groundbreaking stuff. I brought to my table, my little group, this idea that I had been toying around with because of working at camp, called, the quippy name is Do More Nothing. Okay. And what it came about was, at camp, we are a society that is trying to like de-alienate each other over a week of camp through the process of being at camp, being in nature, being in a loving society, being anchored in Christ is like the tagline. And so, uh, but instead of de-alienating each other and like connecting and reintegrating with our humanity and like being with each other, all that happens by accident, just by virtue of the place being how it is. Instead, what we do is fill the time as much as we possibly can with activities, with services, with doing things. And so the idea was with do more nothing, that when you are doing nothing, you come face to face with your relationship with the value. Because when you're doing nothing, value doesn't disappear, but it's inert. You're not creating value, you're not extracting value, and you're not using value. But your relationship with value is still there. And so in our society, doing nothing is a huge, huge, huge undertaking. It's such a challenge because value is the most important thing.
Yeah.
So doing nothing, you get to confront value. And it is in that space that you can engage with your relationship with it. This is our like pendulum thing, where one side of the pendulum is do everything all the time and get as much value out of the life. This is the other side of the pendulum of do nothing. Okay. And the getting off the pendulum through the doing nothing, getting on the Z axis, is by engaging with your relationship with value. And then through that, you can witness, hopefully, I mean, this is theory, conjecture, based off of experience. But through that, when you hop off the pendulum and you can see the matrix of value, you can figure out where and how you can de-alienate people. And I mean, this is where I think figures such as Christ and Buddha were coming from. You know, they were figures that were reintegrating people with each other, with creation, de-alienating people, removing these structures of value, tearing them down, and building up compassion for each other.
Yeah.
Thoughts?
I feel like we could do a whole one of these on value, just because that is another sort of hub for a lot of different spokes.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, going back to it, I like using value as a lens to look at the topic of celebrity. That was pretty good.
Right.
I've been taking more notes these past like 10 minutes for next time. I'm about at my limit.
Okay.
My drum set stool isn't super comfortable after 2 hours. And I've been shifting my weight around trying to make my ass not so sore. So I think it's about tap out time for Trev.
Well, yeah, and didn't you say tonight was the night you have to clean the crumbs out of the crumb
Tray
toaster?
on my toaster. Yeah, I was gonna do that tonight.
Yeah,
It
that
might
was.
be too late to start now.
It
but
is a sort of arduous, long process,
I
isn't it?
know I might have another night this week.
Yeah.
We'll see.
No,
Sorry,
not that
I
night,
know.
because that night we're doing that one thing, you know?
Oh, you're right.
Oh shoot, yeah, that, but only you guys are doing that.
Oh,
Thing.
dude.
It's the you
It was
guys
my
night.
turn to do it. My roommates are gonna be pissed.
Oh man.
Damn it. I mean, I feel pretty good about wrapping up. I think we have like some juicy tidbits to get going on
Yeah, I agree.
next
Yeah,
time.
we ended up with
It's nice
definite
to
strong couple of topics for not going into it with anything.
yeah, it's nice to leave it while the pipe is hot, as they say.
Yeah,
You know,
and
get the
yeah,
wheels moving, and then just like, okay, we have this kind of general excitement about this thing.
Yeah.
But let's give it a week.
Yeah.
Come back, and when we come back, we're gonna fuck it.
Boom, boom, boom. Yeah. You
You
don't
get-
need to. Well.
You
Yeah.
gotta leave them wanting more, baby. You know what I'm talking about.
Oh my gosh. The point is yeah, like you don't have to exhaust the list. I mean, the list is never gonna exhaust ever,
Dude,
Mm.
clearly. But yeah, I like that. I think I mean, I don't know if we'll come back and address everything we talked about, like just right away next week, but I think there's a lot of threads that I know I'm gonna be thinking about a lot. So I'm happy with it.
Well, Trev, do you want to sign us off?
I will. Thanks for tuning in, week 3, and until we see you again, see you at Mike's.
Cheers.
Bye.